All right. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon? Good afternoon. Yeah, definitely afternoon. I'm later than normal today, but thank you for being here. My name is Kris, this is Wizard Way, and you have caught Hobbit Hump Day once again. The days where I read J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit so you don't have to. We tend to go about 40 pages per stream, so not the shortest streams in the world, but we'll try and stay on topic today. If you're wondering why I'm late, it is because a lot of new information for the Rings of Power, well, not information, but images for the Rings of Power TV show dropped this morning, and Morfydd Clark decided to post on her story a picture of the You Are All Welcome Here Elvish merch that I made with Don Marshall 72. So that was exciting. That's what I woke up to. I woke up to that and new promo images for the Rings of Power, and I freaked out and started making videos and completely lost track of time. So I forgot it was Wednesday. Here we are. Ooh, let's say hello to everybody. Something in my eye. Alright, good morning. Good morning, Darnak. Good morning, Sarah. Sarah Lum. Happy Pride. Happy Pride indeed. I'm excited. It is now officially Pride Month. There is a link down here in the YouTube video, should be visible, and it says Pride merch, and then it gives the link, or here, it gives the link for my Teespring shop. So I have 3 designs that I've made for Pride Month specifically, but they will be available indefinitely. So there's no huge time crunch for y'all to support me if you'd like to support me. But basically all of the merch that I sell this month, and probably after this month, is going to be going toward my top surgery fund. So I would like to get top surgery. This is not a cheap thing, especially in the United States, where insurance doesn't cover that stuff. So pretty sure, even if I establish medical necessity, which is just an insurance BS thing that they force us to do here in the States, if I get the sign-off from a medical professional saying, for my state of mind, for my mental health, it is necessary that I get top surgery to help with my dysphoria. Even if I manage to do that, insurance will probably not cover it. So, assuming that this is going to be anywhere from 8 to 15 grand, I need to start crowdsourcing. I need to start crowdfunding a little bit, so I'm saving up some money. I do have a chunk that I have in savings that's set aside for it, but I would really like to not completely deplete my savings in order to get my top surgery. So, everything that I sell for Pride Month merch, including my design that I did for Don Marshall 72's Pride Month merch, all of that stuff. A third of that is getting donated to charity over on Don's stuff, and a third of it is going to me, toward my top surgery. So, you directly benefit someone of the community by buying our merch. And I appreciate that. So if you do that, thank you. Link is there. That said, let's get started. Because we're starting late, which means we're gonna be at this for a while. And I'll just, I haven't eaten yet today, so we'll worry about that when we finish the stream. Womp womp. Alright, so when we last left The Hobbit and his friends, Bilbo et al., we had just escaped the clutches of the Elven King of Mirkwood, aka Thranduil, though he's never actually named in the book. He's only named later on in The Lord of the Rings and Silmarillion and stuff like that. So we just escaped through a trapdoor where they tend to push out empty barrels, and those barrels drift downstream of the river running to Lake Town, where they basically are a method of trade between the elves of Mirkwood and the humans of Lake Town. So, this is an established trade route, and Bilbo managed to free all of the dwarves, which were kept in separate cells throughout the very maze-like caverns of Thranduil's dwelling in the mountain. He managed to release all of them, basically by stealing the keys. He stole the keys. He put on the ring and he stole the keys from an elf who was getting drunk. because it was a festival that night. Elves drink just like anybody else. And so we got, you know, the head of the guards and Thranduil's butler getting sloshed down in the cellars, in the wine cellars. Bilbo took the ring, took the key ring and freed all of his friends. And he did put the key ring back because, you know, being a polite hobbit, he didn't want the elf to get in too much trouble. So better that nobody knows how this happened. No one can, you know, blame the guard for losing his keys because he has his keys. He had his keys the whole time. What on earth happened? So, Bilbo's kind of kind-hearted, I'll give him that. And the elves weren't mistreating the dwarves. They were still giving them food and drink and stuff. I think that's worth pointing out. The elves aren't complete assholes. Even, like, to them, poorly treating their prisoners is still being treated pretty well. The dwarves would just be super grumbly about it anyway because they're being imprisoned by elves. Like, that. They're not going to give a kind review, I don't think. He's a thief, but a polite thief. Gosh, what... That was sparking a movie dialogue memory of mine. I think it's Pirates of the Caribbean? Something about an honest thief. Oh well. Like, I'm not gonna be able to remember it. Yeah, it was kind of nice of Bilbo to think of that little detail. Like, he didn't want him to get in too much trouble, so he did put the keyring back. But he stowed away all of the dwarves in these giant barrel casks. And he tried to pad them in with all sorts of, you know, hay and other, you know, stuff to try and pad them in there. And the elves were kind of sloshed, and they were like, why? These aren't empty barrels. And they're like, but they're in the group with the empty ones that are supposed to be pushed out. So just push them out anyway. If supplies for the king are being pushed down the river and have to be brought back up, then we'll deal with that later. And they're like, okay, yes, sir. And they push out the barrels and the dwarves escape. Now, in my head, I'm thinking this is problematic for a couple reasons. A, even if you manage to not get leaks in the barrels, which obviously they don't have leaks or else we'd have a couple very dead dwarves. But even if you don't get leaks, number one, you'd have to have some sort of leak or else they couldn't breathe, right? And I'm just thinking at least one of these dwarves has to be upside down this entire time. They gotta be, like, flipped upside down for hours, just floating down the river upside down in a barrel. That's just how it is in my brain. I can't unthink it, okay? Poor dwarves. And Bilbo gets really cold because he has to just try to cling on the top of a barrel with the ring on. But yes, these dwarfs are gonna be miserable. There had to be some sort of, like, air hole for them, so these can't be completely airtight barrels. But they obviously can't leak too badly, or else they would be inefficient for this river trade thing they've got going on. So, I don't know. Like, mechanics, this doesn't make too much sense to me, because physics, but... But I can't unthink a bunch of dwarves are upside down this entire time, just, like, cursing. As quietly as they might, but cursing nonetheless. Poor dwarves. But that's where we left off. They were on their way to Lake Town. And, Bilbo got them out. I believe. Let's see. Yes, so the barrels were just pulled up by the elves that put them onto rafts and then take them the rest of the way to Lake Town. So that's where we were. Bilbo is just sort of tagging along. He has the ring on, so he's still invisible. But the dwarves are in their barrels, and the elves are like, wow, this is a heavy load. They float too deep. Some of these are never empty. If they had come ashore in the daylight, we might have had a look inside, they said. No time now, cried the raftmen. Shove off. So they're heading down the river to Lake Town, and that's where we left them off. Hey, thank you so much, Drake. I appreciate that. Okay. One more sip of water, and we'll get started with the reading. So, we're at chapter 10. Yeah, who needs physics? It's a fantasy story. I don't want physics in my fantasy. I want more dragons. Okay. Alright, I think we're good to go. Let's do it. Chapter 10. A Warm Welcome. The day grew lighter and warmer as they floated along. After a while, the river rounded a steep shoulder of land that came down upon their left. Under its rocky feet, like an inland cliff, the deepest stream had flowed, lapping and bubbling. Suddenly, the cliff fell away, the shore sank, the trees ended. Then Bilbo saw a sight. The lands opened wide about him, filled with the waters of the river, which broke up and wandered in 100 winding courses, or halted in marshes and pools, dotted with isles on every side. But still a strong water flowed on steadily through the midst. And far away, its dark head in a torn cloud, there loomed the mountain, its nearest neighbors to the northeast, and the tumbled land that joined it to them could not be seen. All alone it rose and looked across the marshes to the forest, the lonely mountain. Bilbo had come far and through many adventures to see it, and now he did not like the look of it in the least. As he listened to the talk of the raftmen and pieced together the scraps of information they let fall, he soon realized that he was very fortunate ever to have seen it at all, even from this distance. Dreary as had been his imprisonment, and unpleasant as was his position, to say nothing of the poor dwarves underneath him, still he had been more lucky than he had guessed. The talk was all of the trade that came and went on the waterways, and the growth of the traffic on the river, as the roads out of the east towards Mirkwood vanished or fell into disuse, and of the bickerings of the lakemen and the wood elves, about the upkeep of the forest river and the care of the banks. So, apparently there's a point of contention there between the elves and men. The elves are probably like, dude, we're protecting you from the spiders. Like, the spiders don't get down the river to Lake Town because we're here protecting you, so can't you just, like, upkeep the river, do us a solid? And the men are like, bro, this is trade. This is a trade route. And if all of your roads through Mirkwood weren't getting, disused and taken over by spiders, then maybe we wouldn't have to upkeep this river so much. Jeez. Can't you meet us halfway? Like, I can imagine these negotiations happening and Thranduil just getting pissed. Alright, did I skip anything? No, I did not. Cool. Those lands had changed much since the days when dwarves dwelled in the mountain, days which most people now remembered only as a very shadowy tradition. They had changed even in recent years, and since the last news that Gandalf had had of them. Great floods and rains had swollen the waters that flowed east, and there had been an earthquake or two, which some were inclined to attribute to the dragon, alluding to him chiefly with a curse or an ominous nod in the direction of the mountain. The marshes and bogs had spread wider and wider on either side, paths had vanished, and many a rider and wanderer too, if they had tried to find the lost ways across. This is treacherous. The elf road through the wood, which the dwarves had followed on the advice of Beorn, now came to a doubtful and little-used end at the eastern edge of the forest. Only the river offered any longer a safe way from the skirts of Mirkwood in the north to the mountain-shadowed plains beyond, and the river was guarded by the Wood Elves' king. Sorry. I have a bit of skin hanging off my lip and I hate it. It's one of my bad habits, okay? I bite my lips. They're constantly dry and cracking. Okay. So you see, Bilbo had come in the end by the only road that was any good. It might have been some comfort to Mr. Baggins shivering on the barrels if he had known that news of this had reached Gandalf far away and had given him great anxiety, and that he was, in fact, finishing his other business, which does not come into this tale, and getting ready to come in search of Thorin's company. But Bilbo did not know it. All he knew was that the river seemed to go on and on and on forever, and he was hungry and had a nasty cold in the nose, and did not like the way the mountain seemed to frown at him and threaten him as it drew ever nearer. After a while, however, the river took a more southerly course, and the mountain receded again, and at last, late in the day, the shores grew rocky. The river gathered all its wandering waters together into a deep and rapid flood, and they swept along at a great speed. The sun had set when turning with another sweep towards the east. The forest river rushed into the long lake. There it had a wide mouth with stony cliff-like gates at either side, whose feet were piled with shingles. The long lake! Bilbo had never imagined that any water that was not the sea could look so big. It was so wide that the opposite shores looked small and far, but it was so long that its northerly end, which pointed towards the mountain, could not be seen at all. Only from the map did Bilbo know that away up there, where the stars of the Wine were already twinkling, the running river came down into the lake from Dale, and with the forest river filled with deep waters what must once have been a great deep rocky valley. Sorry. Gotta loosen up. At the southern end, the doubled waters poured out again over high waterfalls and ran away hurriedly to unknown lands. In the still evening air, the noise of the falls could be heard like a distant roar. Not far from the mouth of the forest river was the strange town he had heard the elves speak of in the king's cellars. It was not built on the shore, though there were a few huts and buildings there, but right out on the surface of the lake, protected from the swirl of the entering river by a promontory of rock which formed a calm bay. A great bridge made of wood ran out to where the huge piles made of the forest. Oh my gosh, my brain completely froze on that one. A great bridge made of wood ran out to where, on huge piles made of forest trees, was built a busy wooden town. Not a town of elves, but of men, who still dared to dwell here under the shadow of the distant Dragon Mountain. They still throve on the trade that came up the great river from the south, and was carted past the falls to their town. But in the great days of old, when Dale in the north was rich and prosperous, they had been wealthy and powerful, and there had been fleets of boats on the waters, and some were filled with gold, and some with warriors in armor, and there had been wars and deeds which were now only a legend. The rotting piles of a greater town could still be seen along the shores when the waters sank in a drought. But men remembered little of all that, though some still sang old songs of the dwarven kings of the mountain, Thror and Thrain of the race of Durin, and the coming of the dragon, and the fall of the lords of Dale. Some sang too that Thror and Thrain would come back one day, and gold would flow in rivers through the mountain gates, and all that land would be filled with new song and new laughter. but this pleasant legend did not much affect their daily business. Let me take a quick drink here and bite my lip. It's a bad habit. Poor, sick Bilbo. He has quite a time of it, doesn't he? As soon as the raft of barrels came in sight, boats rowed out from the piles of the town, and voices hailed the raft steerers. Then ropes were cast and oars were pulled, and soon the raft was drawn out of the current of the forest river and towed away round the high shoulder of rock into the little bay of Lake Town. There it was moored not far from the shoreward head of the great bridge. Soon men would come up from the south and take some of the casks away, and others they would fill with goods they had brought to be taken back up the stream to the wood elves' home. In the meanwhile, the barrels were left afloat while the elves of the raft and the boatmen went to feast in Lake Town. They would have been surprised if they could have seen what happened down by the shore after they had gone and the shades of night had fallen. First of all, a barrel was cut loose by Bilbo and pushed to the shore and opened. Groans came from inside, and out crept a most unhappy dwarf. Wet straw was in his draggled beard. He was so sore and stiff, so bruised and buffeted, he could hardly stand or stumble through the shallow water to lie groaning on the shore. He had a famished and a savage look, like a dog that has been chained and forgotten in a kennel for a week. It was Thorin. But you could only have told it by his golden chain and by the color of his now dirty and tattered sky-blue hood, with its tarnished silver tassel. It was some time before he would be even polite to the Hobbit. "Well, are you alive, or are you dead?" asked Bilbo quite crossly. Perhaps he had forgotten that he had had at least one good meal more than the dwarves, and also the use of his arms and legs, not to speak of a greater allowance of air. But he's being cross nonetheless. "Are you still in prison, or are you free? If you want food, and if you want to go on with this silly adventure, it's yours after all and not mine. You had better slap your arms and rub your legs and try and help me get the others out while there is a chance." Thorin, of course, saw the sense of this, so after a few more groans he got up and helped the hobbit as well as he could. In the darkness floundering in the cold water, they had a difficult and very nasty job finding which were the right barrels. Knocking outside and calling, only discovered about 6 dwarves that could answer. These were unpacked and helped ashore, where they sat or lay muttering and moaning. They were so soaked and bruised and cramped that they could hardly yet realize their release or be properly thankful for it. Dwalin and Balin were 2 of the most unhappy. It was no good asking them to help. Beaver and Bofer were less knocked about and drier, but they lay down and would do nothing. Fili and Kili, however, who were young for dwarves, and had also been packed more neatly with plenty of straw into smaller casks, had come out more or less smiling, with only a bruise or two and a stiffness that soon wore off. "I hope I never smell the smell of apples again," said Fili. "My tub was full of it. To smell apples everlastingly when you can scarcely move and are cold and sick with hunger is maddening. I could eat anything in the wide world now for hours on end, but not an apple." With the willing help of Fili and Kili, Thorin and Bilbo at last discovered the remainder of the company and got them out. Poor fat Bombur was asleep or senseless. Dori, Nori, Ori, Owen, and Gloin were waterlogged and seemed only half alive. These poor dwarves. They all had to be carried one by one and laid helpless on the shore. "Well, here we are," said Thorin, "and I suppose we ought to thank our stars and Mr. Baggins. I'm sure he has a right to expect it, though I wish he could have arranged a more comfortable journey. Still, all very much at your service once more, Mr. Baggins. No doubt we shall feel properly grateful when we are fed and recovered. In the meantime, what next?" "I suggest Lake Town," said Bilbo. "What else is there?" Nothing else could, of course, be suggested, so leaving the others, Thorin and Fili and Kili and the Hobbit went along the shore to the great bridge. There were guards at the head of it, but they were not keeping very careful watch, for it was so long since there had been any real need. Except for occasional squabbles about river trolls, they were friends with the Wood Elves. Other folk were far away, and some of the younger people in the town openly doubted the existence of any dragon in the mountain, and laughed at the greybeards and gammers who said that they had seen him flying in the sky in their young days. That being so, it is not surprising that the guards were drinking and laughing by a fire in their hut, and did not hear the noise of the unpacking of the dwarves or the footsteps of the 4 scouts. Their astonishment was enormous when Thorin Oakenshield stepped in through the door. "Who are you and what do you want?" they shouted, leaping to their feet and groping for weapons. "Thorin, son of Thrang, son of Thror, king under the mountain," said the dwarf in a loud voice, and he looked it, in spite of his torn clothes and draggled hood. The gold gleamed on his neck and waist, his eyes were deep and dark. "I have come back. I wish to see the master of your town." Then there was tremendous excitement. Some of the more foolish ran out of the hut as if they expected the mountain to go golden in the night and all the waters of the lake turn yellow right away. The captain of the guard came forward. "And who are these?" he asked, pointing to Fili and Kili and Bilbo. "The sons of my father's daughter," answered Thorin, "Fili and Kili of the race of Durin, and Mr. Baggins, who has travelled with us out of the west." "If you come in peace, lay down your arms," said the captain. "We have none," said Thorin, and it was true enough. Their knives had been taken from them by the Wood Elves, and the great sword Orcris too. Bilbo had his short sword, hidden as usual, but he said nothing about that. "We have no need of weapons, who return at last to our own, as spoken of old, nor could we fight against so many. Take us to your master." "He is at feast," said the captain. "Then all the more reason for taking us to him," burst in Fili, who was getting impatient at these solemnities. "We are worn and famished after our long road, and we have sick comrades. Now make haste and let us have no more words, or your master may have something to say to you." "Follow me, then," said the captain, and with 6 men about them, he led them over the bridge, through the gates, and into the marketplace of the town. This was a wide circle of quiet water surrounded by the tall piles on which were built the greater houses, and by long wooden quays, with many steps and ladders, going down to the surface of the lake. From one great hall shone many lights, and there came the sound of many voices. They passed its doors and stood blinking in the light, looking at long tables filled with folk. "I am Thorin, son of Thrang, son of Thror, king under the mountain. I return!" cried Thorin in a loud voice from the door, before the captain could say anything. All leapt to their feet. The master of the town sprang from his great chair, but none rose in greater surprise than the raftmen of the Elves, who were sitting at the lower end of the hall. Pressing forward before the master's table, they cried, "These are prisoners of our king that have escaped! Wandering vagabond dwarves that could not give any good account of themselves, sneaking through the woods and molesting our people." "Really? Is this true?" asked the master. As a matter of fact, he thought it far more likely than the return of the king under the mountain, if any such person had ever existed. "It is true that we were wrongfully waylaid by the Elven king and imprisoned without cause as we journeyed back to our own land," answered Thorin. "But lock nor bar may hinder the homecoming spoken of old, nor is this town in the Wood Elves' realm. I speak to the master of the town of the men of the lake, not to the raftmen of the king." Ooh, fightin' words. Then the master hesitated and looked from one to the other. The Elven king was very powerful in those parts, and the master wished for no enmity with him. Nor did he think much of old songs, giving his mind to trade and tolls and cargoes and gold, to which habit he owed his position. Others were of different mind, however, and quickly the matter was settled without him. The news had spread from the doors of the hall like fire through all the town. People were shouting inside the hall and outside it. The quays were thronged with hurrying feet. Some began to sing snatches of old songs concerning the return of the king under the mountain. That it was Thror's grandson, not Thror himself, that had come back did not bother them at all. Others took up the song, and it rolled loud and high over the lake. Give me a moment. We'll hit the song. Back in my days, there were dwarves in that mountain. Yeah. Sure, great-grandpa. Alright, here's the song. "The king beneath the mountains, the king of carven stone, the lord of silver fountains shall come into his own. His crown shall be upholden, his harp shall be restrung. His halls shall echo golden to songs of yore resung. The woods shall wave on mountains and grass beneath the sun. His wealth shall flow in fountains and the rivers golden run. The streams shall run in gladness, the lakes shall shine and burn. All sorrows fail and sadness at the mountain king's return." So they sang, or very like that. Only there was a great deal more of it, and there was much shouting, as well as music of harps and of fiddles mixed up with it. Indeed, such excitement had not been known in the town in the memory of the oldest grandfather. The Wood Elves themselves began to wonder greatly, and even to be afraid. They did not know, of course, how Thorin had escaped, and they had begun to think their king might have made a serious mistake. As for the master, he saw there was nothing else for it but to obey the general clamor, for the moment at any rate, and to pretend to believe that Thorin was what he said. So he gave up to him his own great chair, and set Fili and Kili beside him in places of honor. Even Bilbo was given a seat at the high table, and no explanation of where he came in, no songs had alluded to him even in the obscurest way, was asked for in that general bustle. So no one's asking questions about Bilbo. They're like, well, he's not mentioned, but that's fine. Everyone's just too excited. Yeah, that is a really good poem right there, the song. Soon afterwards, the other dwarves were brought into the town amid scenes of astonishing enthusiasm. They were all doctored and fed and housed and pampered in the most delightful and satisfactory fashion. A large house was given up to Thorin and his company. Boats and rowers were put at their service, and crowds sat outside and sang songs all day, or cheered if any dwarf showed so much as his nose. You see one just peeking out of a shutter and going, woo! Like a huge commotion over just someone peeking out. Okay. Some of the songs were old ones, but some of them were quite new and spoke confidently of the sudden death of the dragon and of cargoes of rich presents coming down the river to Lake Town. These were inspired largely by the master, and they did not particularly please the dwarves, But in the meantime, they were well contented, and they quickly grew fat and strong again. So, time is passing a bit. Indeed, within a week, they were quite recovered, fitted out in fine cloth of their proper colors, with beards combed and trimmed, and proud steps. Thorin looked and walked as if his kingdom was already regained and Smaug chopped up into little pieces. Then, as he had said, the dwarves' good feeling towards the little hobbit grew stronger every day. There were no more groans or grumbles. They drank to his health, and they patted him on the back, and they made a great fuss of him, which was just as well, for he was not feeling particularly cheerful. He had not forgotten the look of the mountain, nor the thought of the dragon, and he had beside a shocking cold. For 3 days he sneezed and coughed, and he would not go out, and even after that his speeches at banquets were limited to, "Thank you very much." Literally, "Thag you very bush." Thank you very much. In the meanwhile, the Wood Elves had gone back up the Forest River with their cargoes, and there was great excitement in the king's palace. I have never heard what happened to the chief of the guards and the butler. Nothing, of course, was ever said about keys or barrels while the dwarves stayed in Lake Town, and Bilbo was careful never to become invisible. Still, I dare say, more was guessed than was known, though doubtless Mr. Baggins remained a bit of a mystery. In any case, the king knew now the dwarves' errand, or thought he did, and he said to himself, "Very well. We'll see. No treasure will come back through Mirkwood without my having something to say in the matter. But I expect they will all come to a bad end, and serve them right." He, at any rate, did not believe in dwarves fighting and killing dragons like Smaug, and he strongly suspected attempted burglary, or something like it, which shows he was a wise elf, and wiser than the men of the town, though not quite right, as we shall see in the end. He sent out his spies about the shores of the lake, and as far northward towards the mountains as they would go, and waited. At the end of a fortnight, Thorin began to think of departure. While the enthusiasm still lasted in the town, was the time to get help. It would not do to let everything cool down with delay. So he spoke to the master and his counselors, and said that soon he and his company must go on towards the mountain. Then, for the first time, the master was surprised and a little frightened. If he wondered if Thorin was after all really a descendant of the old kings. Yeah, and he wondered. He wondered if that was true. He had never thought that the dwarves would actually dare to approach Smaug, but believed they were frauds who would sooner or later be discovered and be turned out. He was wrong. Thorin, of course, was really the grandson of the king under the mountain, and there is no knowing what a dwarf would not dare and do for revenge of the recovery of his own, or the recovery of his own. But the master was not sorry at all to let them go. They were expensive to keep, and their arrival had turned things into a long holiday in which business was at a standstill. Let them go and bother Smaug, and see how he welcomes them, he thought. Certainly, O Thorin Thrain's son, Thror's son, was what he said, you must claim your own. The hour is at hand, spoken of old. What help we can offer shall be yours, and we trust to your gratitude when your kingdom is regained. So one day, although autumn was now getting far on, the winds were cold and the leaves were falling fast, 3 large boats left Lake Town, laden with rowers, dwarves, Mr. Baggins, and many provisions. Horses and ponies had been sent round the circuitous. Horses and ponies had been sent round by circuitous paths to meet them at their appointed landing place. The master and his counselors bade them farewell from the great steps of the town hall that went down to the lake. People sang on the quays and out of windows. The white oars dipped and splashed, and off they went north, up the lake on the last stage of their long journey. The only person thoroughly unhappy was Bilbo. Thus ends chapter 10. How dare that cold? Right, because September, right? September 22nd? Am I remembering that correctly? I think it's September 22nd is Bilbo's birthday. It's either the 21st or the 22nd. I'm pretty sure it's the 22nd. I'm gonna kick myself if I'm wrong. How dare. Alright, so one more chapter to go. Before we continue, though... Or no, wait. It's 2 more chapters to go. We're reading 3 chapters today. My brain. Oh my goodness, it's 10 through 12, not 10 and 11. Okay, so 2 more chapters. I think the next chapter's pretty short. Before we continue, let's take a quick break to look at the illustration. So I'm going to switch my camera up for a moment. Hopefully this works. Yay! Okay. So here is the illustration of Lake Town. Sorry guys on TikTok, you can't see. All the barrels. I find it interesting that even in this picture, we end up having these sort of swan boats. Like, it's an ongoing theme with Tolkien, having the swan boats. Hey, hello again! Oh, I'm so glad. Yeah, enjoy the reading. Not everyone's able to. It can be a vision issue, it can be a cognitive issue. Sometimes it's just easier to listen to someone else read, and you can multitask too. I'm terrible at multitasking, but some people, they do tasks better when they have a background noise like someone reading. And that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help y'all focus on whatever you need to focus on. Alright, let's switch the camera back. Okay. Alright, so chapter 11, On the Doorstep. In 2 days going, they rode right up the long lake and passed out into the river running. And now they could all see the lonely mountain towering grim and tall before them. The stream was strong, and their going slow. At the end of the 3rd day, some miles up the river, they drew in to the left or western bank and disembarked. Because remember, they're heading north, so left is the west. Here they were joined by the horses with other provisions and necessaries, and the ponies for their own use that had been sent to meet them. They packed what they could on the ponies, and the rest was made into a store under a tent, but none of the men out of the town would stay with them, even for the night, so near to the shadow of the mountain. "Not at any rate until the songs have come true," said they. It was easier to believe in the dragon, and less easy to believe in Thorin in these wild parts. Indeed, their stores had no need of any guard, for all the land was desolate and empty. So their escort left them, making off swiftly down the river and the shoreward paths, although the night was already drawing on. They spent a cold and lonely night, and their spirits fell. The next day they set out again. Balin and Bilbo rode behind, each leading another pony heavily laden beside him. The others were some way ahead, picking out a slow road, for there were no paths. They made northwest, slanting away from the river running, and drawing ever nearer and nearer to a great spur of the mountain that was flung out southwards toward them. It was a weary journey, and a quiet and stealthy one. There was no laughter or song or sound of harps, and the pride and hopes which had stirred in their hearts at the singing of old songs by the lake died away to a plodding gloom. What a descriptive way to say it. A plodding gloom. Sorry, double checking my audio for a second, because I keep hearing my amethystium thing making some stutters. Okay. Hopefully it's not too bad. Hopefully it's not noticeable. They knew that they were drawing near to the end of their journey, and that it might be a very horrible end. The land about them grew bleak and barren, though once, as Thorin told them, it had been green and fair. There was little grass, and before long there was neither bush nor tree, and only broken and blackened stumps to speak of ones long vanished. They were come to the desolation of the dragon, and they were come at the waning of the year. They reached the skirts of the mountain all the same without meeting any danger or any sign of the dragon other than the wilderness he had made about his lair. The mountain lay dark and silent before them, and ever higher above them. They made their first camp on the western side of the great southern spur, which ended in a height called Ravenhill. I wanted to say Ravenhill. My brain thinks Elvish. I'm like, it's not even English, it's Elvish, right? No, Ravenhill. Okay. On this there had been an old watchpost, but they dared not climb it yet. It was too exposed. Before setting out to search the western spurs of the mountain for the hidden door, on which all their hopes rested, Thorin sent out a scouting expedition to spy out the land to the south, where the front gate stood. For this purpose he chose Balin and Fili and Kili, and with them went Bilbo. They marched under the grey and silent cliffs to the feet of Ravenhill. There the river, after winding a wide loop over the valley of Dale, turned from the mountain on its road to the lake, flowing swift and noisily. Its bank was bare and rocky, tall and steep above the stream, and gazing out from it over the narrow water, foaming and splashing among many boulders, they could see in the wide valley shadowed by the mountain's arms the grey ruins of ancient houses, towers, and walls. "There lies all that is left of Dale," said Balin. The mountainsides were green with woods, and all the sheltered valley rich and pleasant in the days when the bells rang in that town. He looked both sad and grim as he said this. He had been one of Thorin's companions on the day the dragon came. They did not dare to follow the river much further towards the gate, but they went on beyond the end of the southern spur, until, lying hidden behind a rock, they could look out and see the dark, cavernous opening in the great cliff wall between the arms of the mountain. Out of it the waters of the running river sprang, and out of it too there came a stream and a dark smoke. A steam and a dark smoke, my bad. Steam and dark smoke. Nothing moved in the waste, save the vapor and the water, and every now and again a black and ominous crow. The only sound was the sound of the stony water, and every now and again the harsh croak of a bird. Balin shuddered. "Let us return," he said. "We can do no good here, and I don't like these dark birds. They look like spies of evil." "The dragon is still alive and in the halls under the mountain, then, or I imagine so from the smoke," said the hobbit. "That does not prove it," said Balin, "though I don't doubt you are right. But he might be gone away some time, or he might be lying out on the mountainside keeping watch, and still I expect smokes and steams would come out of these gates. All the halls within must be filled with his foul reek." With such gloomy thoughts, followed ever by the croaking crows above them, they made their weary way back to the camp. Only in June they had been guests in the fair house of Elrond, and though autumn was now crawling towards winter, that pleasant time now seemed years ago. They were alone in the perilous waste, without hope of further help. They were at the end of their journey, but as far as ever, it seemed, from the end of their quest. None of them had much spirit left. Now, strange to say, Mr. Baggins had more than the others. He would often borrow Thorin's map and gaze at it, pondering over the runes and the message of the moon letters Elrond had read. It was he that made the dwarves begin the dangerous search on the western slopes for the secret door. They moved their camp then to a long valley, narrower than the great dale in the south where the gates of the river stood, and walled with lower spurs of the mountain. Two of these were thrust forward west from the main mass in long, steep-sided ridges that fell ever downwards towards the plain. On this western side there were fewer signs of the dragons' marauding feet, and there was some grass for their ponies. From this western camp, shadowed all day by cliff and wall until the sun began to sink towards the forest, day by day they toiled in parties, searching for paths up the mountainside. If the map was true, somewhere high above the cliff at the valley's head must stand the secret door. Day by day they came back to their camp without success. But at last, unexpectedly, they found what they were seeking. Fili and Kili and the Hobbit went back one day down the valley and scrambled among the tumbled rocks at its southern corner. About midday, creeping behind a great stone that stood alone like a pillar, Bilbo came on what looked like rough steps going upwards. Following these excitedly, he and the dwarves found traces of a narrow track, often lost, often rediscovered, that wandered on to the top of the southern ridge and brought them at last to a still narrower ledge, which turned north across the face of the mountain. Looking down, they saw that they were at the top of the cliff at the valley's head and were gazing down to their own camp below. Silently, clinging to the rocky wall on their right, they went in single file along the ledge, till the wall opened and they turned into a little steep-walled bay, grassy-floored, still and quiet. Its entrance, which they had found, could not be seen from below because of the overhang of the cliff, nor from further off because it was so small that it looked like a dark crack and no more. It was not a cave, and was open to the sky above, but at its inner end a flat wall rose up in that lower part, close to the ground. Was as smooth and upright as mason's work, but without a joint or crevice to be seen. No sign was there of post or lintel or threshold, nor any sign of bar or bolt or keyhole, yet they did not doubt that they had found the door at last. They beat on it, they thrust and pushed at it, they implored it to move. They spoke fragments of broken spells of opening, and nothing stirred. At last, tired out, they rested on the grass at its feet, and then at evening began their long climb down. I'm going to pause for a moment. Oh, thank you so much, Saxa. And hello, it seems like forever since I've seen you. Hope you're doing well. Yeah, hydrate, man. I'm trying to remember. Gotta take care of the voice. Alright, let's continue. There was excitement in the camp that night. In the morning they prepared to move once more. Only Beaufort and Bomber were left behind to guard the ponies and such stores as they had brought with them from the river. Switched the page and got ahead of myself. The others went down the valley and up the newly found path, and so to the narrow ledge. Along this, they could carry no bundles or packs, so narrow and breathless was it, with a fall of 150 feet beside them onto sharp rocks below. But each of them took a good coil of rope, wound tight about his waist, and so at last, without mishap, they reached the little grassy bay. There they made their third camp, hauling up what they needed from below with their ropes. Down the same way they were able occasionally to lower one of the more active dwarves, such as Kili, to exchange such news as there was, or to take a share in the guard below, while Bofur was hauled up to the higher camp. Bombur would not come up either the rope or the path. "I am too fat for such fly walls," he said. "I should turn dizzy and tread on my beard, and then you would be 13 again, and the knotted ropes are too slender for my weight." Luckily for him, that was not true, as you will see. I mean, he's got a low opinion of himself with his weight, that's all. "The rope actually will hold. It's too bad it's not heathline." "Real elvish rope, Sam." "Ah, you've been busy." "Yeah, ditto." Pride Month, man. I didn't even think I was doing merch like a week ago. But then my friends poked me, and they helped me with ideas until I was like, okay, fine. I'm like, I've got a week, I can make it happen. It's just gonna take all week. And sure enough, here we are. I also have a ton of videos to film. Oh my word, so many videos need filming. Alright, so the knotted ropes are too slender for my weight, he says. Luckily for him, that was not true, as you will see. In the meantime, some of them explored the ledge beyond the opening and found a path which led higher and higher onto the mountain, but they did not dare to venture very far that way, nor was there much use in it. Out up there a silence reigned, broken by no bird or sound except that of the wind in the crannies of stone. They spoke low and never called or sang, for danger brooded in every rock. The others, who were busy with the secret of the door, had no more success. They were too eager to trouble about the runes or the moon letters, but tried without resting to discover where exactly in the smooth face of the rock the door was hidden. They had brought picks and tools of many sorts from Lake Town, and at first they tried to use these, but when they struck the stone, the handles splintered and jarred their arms cruelly, and the steel heads broke or bent like lead. Mining work, they saw clearly, was no good against the magic that had shut this door, and they grew terrified, too, of the echoing noise. Bilbo found sitting on the doorstep lonesome and worrisome. There was not a doorstep, of course, really, but they used to call the little grassy space between the wall and the opening the doorstep in fun, remembering Bilbo's words long ago at the unexpected party at his hobbit hole, when he said he could sit on the doorstep till they thought of something. And sit and think they did, or wandered aimlessly about, and glummer they became. Their spirits had risen a little at the discovery of the path, but now they sank into their boots. And yet they would not give it up and go away. The hobbit was no longer much brighter than the dwarves. He would do nothing but sit with his back to the rock face, and stare away west through the opening, over the cliff, over the wide lands, to the black wall of Mirkwood, and to the distances beyond, in which he sometimes thought he could catch glimpses of the misty mountains, small and far. If the dwarves asked him what he was doing, he answered, You said sitting on the doorstep and thinking would be my job, not to mention getting inside. So I am sitting and thinking. But I am afraid he was not thinking much of the job, but of what lay beyond the blue distance, the quiet western land, and the hill, and his hobbit hole under it. He was thinking of home, okay? He's homesick. It's all right. A large gray stone lay in the center of the grass, and he stared moodily at it, or watched the great snails. They seemed to love the little shut-in bay with its walls of cool stone, and there were many of them, of huge size, crawling slowly and stickily along its sides. There's just a bunch of snails. "Tomorrow begins the last week of autumn," said Thorin one day. "And winter comes after autumn," said Bifur. "And next year after that," said Dwalin, "and our beards will grow till they hang down the cliff to the valley before anything happens here. What is our burglar doing for us? Since he has got an invisible ring and ought to be a specially excellent performer now, I am beginning to think he might go through the front gate and spy things out a bit." Bilbo heard this, and the dwarves on the rocks just above the enclosure where he was sitting. And good gracious, he thought, so that is what they are beginning to think, is it? Is it always poor me that has to get them out of their difficulties, at least since the wizard left? Whatever am I going to do? I might have known that something dreadful would happen to me in the end. I don't think I could bear to see the unhappy Valley of Dale again. And as for that steaming gate... There are literally 3 exclamation points there. That night he was very miserable and hardly slept. Next day the dwarves all went wandering off in various directions. Some were exercising the ponies down below, some were roving about the mountainside. All day Bilbo sat gloomily in the grassy bay gazing at the stone, or out west through the narrow opening. He had a queer feeling that he was waiting for something. Perhaps the wizard will suddenly come back today, he thought. If he lifted his head, he could see a glimpse of the distant forest. As the sun turned west, there was a gleam of yellow upon its far roof, as if the light caught the last pale leaves. Soon he saw the orange ball of the sun sinking towards the level of his eyes. He went to the opening, and there, pale and faint, was a thin new moon above the rim of earth. At that very moment he heard a sharp crack behind him. There on the gray stone in the grass was an enormous thrush, nearly coal-black, its pale yellow breast freckled with dark spots. Crack! It had caught a snail, and it was knocking it against the stone. Crack! Crack! Suddenly Bilbo understood. Forgetting all danger, he stood on the ledge and hailed the dwarves, shouting and waving. Those that were nearest came tumbling over the rocks as fast as they could along the ledge to him, wondering what on earth was the matter. The others shouted to be hauled up the ropes, except Bombur, of course. He was asleep. Bombur always sleepin'. Quickly, Bilbo explained. They all fell silent, the hobbits standing by the gray stone and the dwarves with wagging beards watching impatiently. The sun sank lower and lower, and their hopes fell. It sank into a belt of reddened cloud and disappeared. The dwarves groaned, but still Bilbo stood almost without moving. The little moon was dipping to the horizon. Evening was coming on. Then suddenly, when their hope was lowest, a red ray of the sun escaped like a finger through a rent in the cloud. A gleam of light came straight through the opening into the bay and fell on the smooth rock face. The old thrush, who had been watching from a high perch with beady eyes and a head cocked to one side, gave a sudden trill. There was a loud crack. A flake of rock split from the wall and fell. A hole appeared suddenly about 3 feet from the ground. Quickly, trembling lest the chance should fade, the dwarves rushed to the rock and pushed in vain. "The key! The key!" cried Bilbo. "Where is Thorin?" Thorin hurried up. "The key!" shouted Bilbo. "The key that went with the map! Try it now while there's still time!" Then Thorin stepped up and drew the key on the chain from around his neck. He put it to the hole. It fitted, and it turned. Snap! The gleam went out. The sun sank, the moon was gone, and evening sprang into the sky. Now they all pushed together, and slowly a part of the rock wall gave way. Long, straight cracks appeared and widened. A door 5 feet high and 3 broad was outlined, and slowly, without a sound, swung inwards. It seemed as if darkness flowed out like a vapor from the hole in the mountainside, and deep darkness, in which nothing could be seen, lay before their eyes, a yawning mouth leading in and down. Since chapter 11. It's so exciting when they get the key in the hole and it actually works. I also love that moment of suspense where they're like, oh yeah, it was supposed to be on Durin's Day. But the weather has to be right, right? If there are too many clouds, the sun won't shine on the keyhole. So there's that moment where the clouds get in the way and they're like, oh no, like it's never gonna work. And then at the last moment, just pew, like a laser right to the keyhole. I love that bit. All right, one more chapter to go. So another 20 pages, I think. Yeah, another 20 pages. So this is a bit of a longer chapter. I do love this. Such a good scene. Have they tried saying friend in Elvish to find the keyhole? That's the wrong door. Wrong door, wrong spell. I imagine they probably did. Like, I would hardcore laugh if one of the spells they were trying to do was the Doors of Durin. Melon. Melon, I say the dwarves, getting all grumbly, like it works on the other doors. I could totally see that happening. What was it? Was Anon Nogothrim Lasto Bethalamen? It would have been funny to see that in the movie. That would be such a fun little, like, Easter egg. Especially because, you know, then Gimli doesn't even know how to open the Doors of Durin later. Dwarf walls are invisible when closed. Tap, tap. Yes, Master Dwarf, even their own masters cannot find them if... if the lore is forgotten or something. I forget the exact quote. You know what I'm talking about. I love Jonathan Rhys Davies, though. Dwarf walls are invisible when closed. Tink, tink. Legolas just rolls his eyes. Why doesn't that surprise me? Rude. It's early on in their friendship. It's fine. Alright, so onward, shall we? Chapter 12. Inside Information. For a long time the dwarves stood in the dark before the door and debated, until at last Thorin spoke. Now is the time for our esteemed Mr. Baggins, who has proved himself a good companion on our long road, and a hobbit full of courage and resource, far exceeding his size. And if I may say so, possessed of good luck far exceeding the usual allowance. Now is the time for him to perform the service for which he was included in our company. Now is the time for him to earn his reward. You are familiar with Thorin's style on important occasions, so I will not give you any more of it. Though he went on a good deal longer than this. It certainly was an important occasion, but Bilbo felt impatient. By now he was quite familiar with Thorin, too, and he knew what he was driving at. If you mean to think it is my job to go into the secret passage first, O Thorin, Thrain's son, Oak and Shield, may your beard grow ever longer, he said crossly. Say so at once and have done. I might refuse. I have got you out of 2 messes already, which were hardly in the original bargain, so that I am, I think, already owed some reward. But third time pays for all, as my father used to say, and somehow I don't think I shall refuse. Perhaps I have begun to trust my luck more than I used to in the old days. He meant last spring before he left his own house, but it seemed centuries ago. But anyway, I think I will go and have a peep at once and get it over. Now who's coming with me?" He did not expect a chorus of volunteers, so he was not disappointed. Philly and Killy looked uncomfortable and stood on one leg, but the others made no pretense of offering, except old Balin, the lookout man, who was rather fond of the Hobbit. He said he would come inside at least, and perhaps a bit of the way too, ready to call for help if necessary. What a stand-up gentleman Balin is. "My cousin Balin will give us a royal welcome." Love that trill of the R. Yeah, without Bilbo, the whole thing would have gone down just chapters ago. Without Bilbo, I think they would have died in the spiders, and that's about it. I'm trying to think. Prior to the spiders, was there something that they did not get through because of Bilbo, or they could not have gotten through without Bilbo? I mean, I'm trying to think. I think it's really the spiders and then the Elven King. Like they wouldn't have gotten past the spiders. Like those spiders would have ate them. Nom 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 nom. Because they made it through the mountain pass. They made it through the mountain pass without Bilbo. And they were surprised that he made it out. So I think they would have gotten as far as Mirkwood, but they would not have gotten through Mirkwood without Bilbo. And Thranduil, if he had come across them at the last second and taken the dwarves prisoner anyway, well, at least Thorin. Thorin was taken pretty early by the elves. So Thorin may have survived. But he'd be imprisoned freaking forever, because Thranduil would be like, "And rot there. Thank you so much." Thorin would have just sat there and rotted. Oh, that's true, the warning he gave in Goblin Town. Gandalf was with them, but that warning helped Gandalf hide. That's super true. Forgot about that. This is why I like reading with other people present. This is nice, because I forget little bits like that. So yeah, they may have gotten out of Goblin Town and gotten to the far side of the Misty Mountains. Maybe. If we give them the benefit of the doubt, because Gandalf was there. But they would not have made it out from the spiders, because Gandalf wasn't there. And honestly, they probably would have been taken by orcs, because they would have, well, I guess Gandalf was still there to help them with Beorn, so they would have gone by the correct road. But yeah, without Gandalf, they just would have been eaten by spiders. End of story. And Smaug would still be just, chilling on the dragon horde. Aha, but we haven't gotten to that bit yet. But yay for Balin. Balin is a very stand-up guy here. He's like, well, I don't really want to, but I'll at least go part of the way. And I'll yell for help if we need it. He's like, I think that's as far as my courage goes, young hobbit. The most that can be said for the dwarves is this. They intended to pay Bilbo really handsomely for his services. They had brought him to do a nasty job for them, and they did not mind the poor little fellow doing it if he would. But they would all have done their best to get him out of trouble if he got into it, as they did in the case of the trolls at the beginning of their adventures, before they had any particular reason for being grateful to him. There it is. Dwarves are not heroes, but calculating folk with a great idea of the value of money. Some are tricky and treacherous and pretty bad lots. Some are not, but are decent enough people like Thorin and company if you don't expect too much. Let's take a moment here because it's worth noting that dwarves are basically morally neutral. Dwarves are chaotic neutral. Like, they have their own code, but they don't really, you know, they don't really play to the rules of other races. It's part of why they don't get along with the elves. But also just the motivation of the elves is completely different. They are absolutely different peoples. But dwarves are simple folk in some ways, and just... they aren't heroes. I think it's worth pointing out that dwarves just in general are not... it's not that they're not heroic when pressed. It's that they don't make a point of being that person. They might stumble into it, but it's never their goal of being, you know, the valiant one. They can be those things, but they aren't them on purpose. They're calculating folk with a great idea of the value of money. Some are tricky and treacherous and pretty bad lots, but some are not. As long as you don't expect too much. They're like, keep your expectations low, and we'll probably meet them. Yeah, definitely. Definitely Mirkwood. Mirkwood will take you out. Oh, thank you so much for the rose. I didn't see that. That was probably ages ago. Thank you so much. Nightshine. You were confused if something was wrong with your Wi-Fi. You were just the first one here. Sorry. Sorry. I mean, you're here. Thank you. If you're here over on TikTok, please take a moment to go over to my YouTube channel. That's where I'm really streaming this, and that's where you can see all the pictures and stuff, because I have another camera that you can't see on the TikTok stuff. So if you have a moment, if you'd really like to support me and give me your watch minutes, switch on over to YouTube. It'll be really, really helpful. Thank you. And thank you for the gift. I see that. Thank you, lovely. Yeah, keep your expectations low, and on a good day we'll pass them. Not by much, but, you know. A dwarf philosopher, probably. Agreed. Alright, let's continue. The stars were coming out behind him in a pale sky barred with black when the hobbit crept through the enchanted door and stole into the mountain. It was far easier going than he expected. This was no goblin entrance or rough wood elves' cave. Rough wood elves' cave? Excuse you? I take offense at that. Or rough wood elves' cave. It was a passage made by dwarves at the height of their wealth and skill. Fair. Fair. Straight as a ruler, smooth-floored and smooth-sided, going with a gentle, never-varying slope direct to some distant end in the blackness below. After a while, Balin bade Bilbo good luck, and stopped before he could see, where he could still see the faint outline of the door, and by a trick of the echoes of the tunnel, hear the rustle of the whispering voices of the others just outside. Then the hobbit slipped on his ring, and warned by the echoes to take more than hobbits care to make no sound, he crept noiselessly down into the dark. He was trembling with fear, but his little face was set and grim. Already he was a very different hobbit from the one that had run out without a pocket handkerchief from Bag End long ago. He had not had a pocket handkerchief for ages. He loosened his dagger in its sheath, tightened his belt, and went on. Yeah, Bilbo the architect critic. Yeah, I know. I see Thranduil being like, freaking rude. So rude. He'd be so cross. Thranduil would be so cross. And he would grumble and probably have all of his artisans, like, smooth the entire realm. The entire cave. Just to be like, rude. I'm not gonna take that. I'm not gonna take that from a hobbit. Now you are in for it at last, Mr. Baggins. Oh, sorry. I said that wrong. Now you are in for it at last, Bilbo Baggins, he said to himself. You went and put your foot right in it the night of that party. And now you have got to pull it out and pay for it. Dear me, what a fool I was and am, said the least tookish part of him. I have absolutely no use for dragon-guarded treasures. The whole lot could stay here forever, if only I could wake up and find this beastly tunnel was my own front hall at home. Just wants to go home. Let him go home. He did not wake up, of course, but went still on and on, till all sign of the door behind had faded away. He was altogether alone. Soon he thought it was beginning to feel warm. Is that a kind of glow I seem to see coming right ahead down there? He thought. It was. As he went forward, it grew and grew till there was no doubt about it. It was a red light steadily getting redder and redder. Also, it was now undoubtedly hot in the tunnel. Wisps of vapor floated up and past him, and he began to sweat. A sound, too, began to throb in his ears, a sort of bubbling, like the noise of a large pot galloping on the fire, mixed with a rumble as of a gigantic tomcat purring. I love purring sounds. This grew to the unmistakable gurgling noise of some vast animal snoring in its sleep down there in the red glow in front of him. It was at this point that Bilbo stopped. Going on from there was the bravest thing he ever did. The tremendous things that happened afterwards were as nothing compared to it. He fought the real battle in the tunnel alone, before he ever saw the vast danger that lay in wait. At any rate, after a short halt go. There should have been a comma there, my bad. At any rate, after a short halt go on, he did. And you can picture him coming to the end of the tunnel, an opening of much the same size and shape as the door above. Through it peeps the hobbit's little head. Before him lies the great bottommost cellar or dungeon hall of the ancient dwarves right at the mountain's root. It is almost dark, so that its vastness can only be dimly guessed, but rising from the near side of the rocky floor there is a great glow, the glow of Smaug. There he lay, a vast red golden dragon, fast asleep. A thrumming came from his jaws and nostrils, and wisps of smoke, but his fires were low in slumber. Beneath him, under all his limbs and his huge coiled tail, and about him on all sides stretching away across the unseen floors, lay countless piles of precious things, gold wrought and unwrought, gems and jewels, and silver red-stained in the ruddy light. Smaug lay, with wings folded like an immense bat, turned partly on one side so that the hobbit could see his underparts and his long pale belly crusted with gems and fragments of gold from his long lying on this costly bed. Behind him, where the walls were nearest, could dimly be seen coats of mail, helms and axes, swords and spears hanging, and there in rows stood great jars and vessels, filled with a wealth that could not be guessed. To say that Bilbo's breath was taken away is no description at all. There are no words left to express his staggerment, since men changed the language that they learned of elves in the days when all the world was wonderful. Bilbo had heard tell and sing of dragon hoards before, but the splendor, the lust, the glory of such treasure had never yet come home to him. His heart was filled and pierced with enchantment, and with the desire of dwarves, and he gazed motionless, almost forgetting the frightful guardian, at the gold beyond price and count. And this to me is a bit of a note about, there's a note in, I forget which book it is exactly, but it's in the history of Middle Earth. There's a note that part of the way that Sauron and Melkor twisted things around them, part of that is also included in the precious metals. Because Melkor was very much like Aule. Melkor being the, maybe not the oldest, but the greatest of the Valar, the greatest of the Ainur. He had part in all the songs of his lessers, which means that he could go and pervert anything to his desires. So when he and then later Sauron go dark, part of what they do in the twisting of the world is that they are the ones who set this spell upon riches. You know, that the metals in the ground don't inherently have any value, but there's value to the dwarves because they make things out of them, and it becomes a valuable resource for them. But the lust for these things, and that sort of the dark side of that coin, is basically put there by Melkor. It's basically put there by Melkor and Sauron. This is part of how they are in their own way able to influence the dwarves and corrupt them to evil. It doesn't have to do with the dwarves' minds, per se, because we know that even when Sauron gives the 7 rings to the Dwarven kings, their minds can't be taken over. And this, of course, is very frustrating to Sauron, but the rings hold that same spell that plays on the more wicked tendencies in someone's nature. And you can see that same spell, that, you know, how did they just put it? That he was pierced with enchantment, with the desire of dwarves. He gazed motionless, almost forgetting the frightful guardian, at the gold beyond price and count. Like, it's a visceral, not just awe and wonder at what he's seeing, but a sudden lust for it, a sudden greed for it, of wanting things for himself. That sort of spell put on these materials comes from Melkor. So when people are like, oh, you know, the dwarves couldn't be overtaken, I was just like, it was the long con. It was all the long con. I think, you know, Sauron probably thought that the rings would be able to overcome the minds of the dwarves, and he was sorely mistaken. So the dwarves were hardier than he gave them credit for, because Sauron has a way of underestimating people. But I think that he was just like, well, at least for the beginning, I'm going to let them keep these rings because it's increasing their wrath, you know, their anger. It's making them bicker, it's making them greedier, and that's causing a bit of strife that I can use to my advantage. And, you know, that's when what later become dragon hoards, that's when these treasure hoards, the dwarf hoards, become a thing. Because there is a darkness that is still within the power of those rings, and it plays on that inner dark quality of the dwarves. So, those are my thoughts on that. I'm going to go more in depth with the dwarves and the 7 dwarven rings of power, like, really soon. I already have a few videos drafted. I just need to record them, which was what I was going to do today until I realized it was Wednesday and I was supposed to stream. Whoops. I'll still probably do some filming today. But that's my thought about sort of this enchantment that Bilbo feels, is a reference to a larger theme that is going on that Tolkien later explores in, the Lord of the Rings, with the dwarves delved too greedily and too deep, right? That's the whole concept. It wasn't necessarily the greed of the dwarves. It was that the greed of the dwarves was enhanced by the Rings of Power. Oh, thank you, lovely. That's lovely of you to say. But it plays on the shortcomings of the race. And that's intentional. That of course Sauron would use that to his advantage. So while he didn't originally intend on gifting the rings to the dwarves, and he was not ultimately happy with the effect that they had on the dwarves, it still played to his advantage. The rings didn't corrupt the dwarves to evil, but they did make the dwarves less friendly, shall we say. They were less likely to band together, and they were less likely to be united with the other races against him. Because if they're like, well, I don't care about the elves, I don't care about mortal men, I care about my home, my riches, and proving that I am the one in control of my sphere. With that mindset, you are very much less likely to be a threat. This was divide and conquer. And in some cases, we know that some of the dwarven kings did join Sauron in the Battle of the Last Alliance, because there's a note about almost every race being divided in that conflict. That men, like specifically we know men were divided because we had the Easterlings and some of the Haradrim back then, who had been corrupted by Sauron and were fighting for Sauron. We had, the orcs, the trolls, all of those things. The only race that is explicitly said to have not been divided in this case was the elves. The elves had no division. They were like, we are taking this guy down. But other than that, it's said that, everyone else was divided, and that includes the dwarves. And it's thought that at that point, at least 2 of the dwarven kings had been recruited to Sauron's side and fought in the Battle of the Last Alliance. They were beaten, but they probably retreated to their eastern kingdoms. But they're there and they fight for Sauron. So things are far more complicated than you necessarily think. Sauron is good at evil improv. He could totally teach evil improv 101. No, he'll find some way of making it work. He's really resourceful. Like, that's why I love him so much as a character. Sauron is brilliant. He's brilliant. He's a wonderful bad guy. I really hope he gets screen time in the Rings of Power. If he doesn't, I feel like it's a damn waste. But I'm also of the mind that the Rings of Power should have been told from Sauron's perspective. I think 5 seasons being inside Sauron's head would be absolutely fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. But alas, here we are. That's my dream project. But I'm not the one in charge. Let's continue, though, or else I'm never finishing this. So Bilbo feels this momentary enchantment and the desire of dwarves. And so he's just sitting there dumbfounded. Yeah, Sauron for the win. There will be... September is Sauron Appreciation Month, okay? It is simping for Sauron September. Because I know so many people do no simp September. Fuck that. We shall be simping for Sauron this September. I already have several merch ideas that I have created for that. So we're doing Pride Month merch now, and then I'll have you guys, you'll have a break. You'll have a break for a few months. But September, girl, we're hitting September, and I'm a slap you with some Sauron love. I have a few different designs. It's going to be a lot of fun. So have fun with that when the time comes. September. Okay, where was I? He gazed for what seemed like an age, before drawn almost against his will. Again, the spell. There's a spell on riches, okay? Before drawn almost against his will, he stole from the shadow of the doorway, across the floor to the nearest edge of the mounds of treasure. Above him, the sleeping dragon lay, a dire menace even in his sleep. He grasped a great two-handled cup, as heavy as he could carry, and cast one fearful eye upwards. Smaug stirred a wing, opened a claw. The rumble of his snoring changed its note. Then Bilbo fled, but the dragon did not wake, not yet, but shifted into other dreams of greed and violence, lying there in his stolen hall while the little hobbit toiled back up the long tunnel. His heart was beating, and a more fevered shaking was in his legs than when he was going down, but still he clutched the cup, and his chief thought was, "I've done it! This will show them. More like a grocer than a burglar, indeed. We'll hear no more of that." Nor did he. Balin was overjoyed to see the hobbit again, and as delighted as he was surprised. He picked Bilbo up and carried him out into the open air. It was midnight, and clouds had covered the stars, but Bilbo lay with his eyes shut, gasping and taking pleasure in the feel of the fresh air again, and hardly noticing the excitement of the dwarves, or how they praised him and patted him on the back and put themselves and all their families for generations to come at his service. The dwarves were still passing the cup from hand to hand and talking delightedly of the recovery of their treasure, when suddenly a vast rumbling woke in the mountain underneath, as if it was an old volcano that had made up its mind to start eruptions once again. The door behind them was pulled nearly to and blocked from closing with a stone, but up the long tunnel came the dreadful echoes, from far down in the depths of a bellowing and a trampling that made the ground beneath them tremble. Then the dwarfs forgot their joy and their confident boasts of a moment before, and cowered down in fright. Smaug was still to be reckoned with. It does not do to leave a live dragon out of your calculations if you live near him. Dragons may not have much real use for all their wealth, but they know it to an ounce, as a rule, especially after long possession, and Smaug was no exception. He had passed from an uneasy dream, in which a warrior altogether insignificant in size but provided with a bitter sword and great courage figured most unpleasantly, to a doze. So he passed from an uneasy dream to a doze, and from a doze to wide waking. There was a breath of strange air in his cave. Could there be a draught from that little hole? He had never felt quite happy about it, though it was so small, and now he glared at it in suspicion, and wondered why he had never blocked it up. Of late, he had half fancied he had caught the dim echoes of a knocking sound from far above that came down through it to his lair. He stirred and stretched forth his neck to sniff. Then he missed the cup. Thieves! Fire! Murder! Such a thing had not happened since first he came to the mountain. His rage passes description. The sort of rage that is only seen when rich folk that have more than they can enjoy suddenly lose something that they have long had but have never before used or wanted. Cue the Jeffrey Bezos song. Jeffrey Bezos. Jeffrey Bezos. None of that commentary. Moving on. His fire belched forth. The hall smoked. He shook the mountain roots. He thrust his head in vain at the little hole, and then coiling his length together, roaring like thunder underground, he sped from his deep lair, through its great door, out into the huge passages of the mountain palace, and up towards the front gate. To hunt the whole mountain till he had caught the thief and had torn and trampled him was his one thought. He issued from the gate, the waters rose in fierce whistling steam, and up he soared blazing into the air and settled on the mountaintop in a spout of green and scarlet flame. Side note here, green flames are produced by copper. Copper burns bright green. And that is your moment of scientific knowledge in this stream. I loved that part of chemistry lab when I got to burn shit. But no, seriously, like the specific color of copper flames, the green of copper flames, favorite color. That is my favorite color. I love the green flames of copper. So you learn something. Copper burns green. And I think it's magnesium and sodium that burn orange. Sodium most likely though. So if you are to touch anything and then you set that thing on fire, it tends to burn orange because of the salt from your hands and your oils. Very specific. I'm like, which part? All of it is. Tolkien is very, very specific. So sorry about that aside, but green and scarlet flames. Ooh, takes me back to that chemistry lab. I love copper flames. Okay, so blazing into the air and settled on the mountain top in a spout of green and scarlet flame. The dwarves heard an awful rumor of his flight, and they crouched against the walls of the grassy terrace, cringing under boulders, hoping somehow to escape the frightful eyes of the hunting dragon. There they would have all been killed if it had not been for Bilbo once again. "Quick! Quick!" he gasped. "The door! The tunnel! It's no good here!" Roused by these words, they were just about to creep inside the tunnel when Bifur gave a cry. "My cousins! Bombur and Bofur, we have forgotten them. They are down in the valley. They will be slain, and all our ponies too, and all our stores lost," moaned the others. "We can do nothing." "Nonsense," said Thorin, recovering his dignity. "We cannot leave them. Get inside, Mr. Baggins, and Balin, and you too, Filly and Killy. The dragon shan't have all of us. Now you others, where are the ropes? Be quick." Those were perhaps the worst moments they had been through yet. The horrible sounds of Smaug's anger were echoing in the stony hollows far above. At any moment he might come blazing down or fly whirling around to find them there, near the perilous cliff's edge, hauling madly on the ropes. Up came Bofur, and still all was safe. Up came Bombur, puffing and blowing while the ropes creaked, and all was safe. Up came some tools and bundles of stores, and then danger was upon them. A whirring noise was heard. A red light touched the points of standing rocks. The dragon came. They had barely time to fly back to the tunnel, pulling and dragging in their bundles, when Smaug came hurtling from the north, licking the mountainsides with flame, beating his great wings with a noise like a roaring wind. His hot breath shriveled the grass before the door, and drove in through the crack they had left and scorched them as they lay hid. Flickering fires leaped up, and black rock shadows danced. Then darkness fell as he passed again. The ponies screamed in terror, burst their ropes, and galloped wildly off. The dragon swooped and turned to pursue them, and was gone. That'll be the end of our poor beasts," said Thorin. "Nothing can escape Smaug once he sees it. Here we are, and here we shall have to stay unless anyone fancies trampling the long open miles back to the river with Smaug on the watch." It was not a pleasant thought. They crept further down the tunnel, and there they lay and shivered through it, though it was warm and stuffy, until dawn came pale through the crack of the door. Every now and again, through the night, they heard the roar. They could hear the roar of the flying dragon grow and then pass and fade as he hunted round and round the mountainsides. He guessed from the ponies, and from the traces of the camps he had discovered, that men had come up from the river and the lake and had scaled the mountainside from the valley where the ponies had been standing. But the door withstood his searching eye, and the little high-walled bay had kept out his fiercest flames. Long he had hunted in vain, till the dawn chilled his wrath, and he went back to his golden couch to sleep, and to gather new strength. He would not forget or forgive the theft, not if 1,000 years turned him to smoldering stone, but he could afford to wait. Slow and silent he crept back to his lair and half closed his eyes. When morning came, the terror of the dwarves grew less. They realized that dangers of this kind were inevitable in dealing with such a guardian, and that it was no good giving up their quest yet. Nor could they get away just now. As Thorin had pointed out, their ponies were lost or killed, and they would have to wait some time before Smaug relaxed his watch sufficiently for them to dare the long way on foot. Luckily, they had saved enough of their stores to last them still for some time. They debated long on what was to be done, but they could think of no way of getting rid of Smaug, which had always been a weak point in their plans, as Bilbo felt inclined to point out. Then, as is the nature of folk that are thoroughly perplexed, they began to grumble at the Hobbit, blaming him for what had at first so pleased them, for bringing away a cup and stirring up Smaug's wrath so soon. "What else do you suppose a burglar is to do?" asked Bilbo angrily. "I was not engaged to kill dragons. That is a warrior's work, but to steal treasure. I made the best beginning I could. Did you expect me to trot back with the whole horde of Thor on my back? If there's any grumbling to be done, I think I might have a say. You ought to have brought 500 burglars, not one. I am sure it reflects great credit on your grandfather, but you cannot pretend that you ever made the vast extent of his wealth clear to me. I should want hundreds of years to bring it all up, if I was 50 times as big and Smaug as tame as a rabbit." After that, of course, the dwarves begged his pardon. What then do you propose we should do, Mr. Baggins?" asked Thorin politely. "I have no idea at the moment. If you mean about removing the treasure, that obviously depends entirely on some new turn of luck, and the getting rid of Smaug. Getting rid of dragons is not at all my line. But I will do my best to think about it. Personally, I have no hopes at all, and wish I was safe back at home. And never mind that for the moment. What are we to do now, today? Well, if you really want my advice, I should say we can do nothing but to stay where we are. By day we can no doubt creep out safely enough to take the air. Perhaps before long 1 or 2 could be chosen to go back to the store by the river and replenish our supplies. But in the meanwhile, everyone ought to be well inside the tunnel by night. Now I will make you an offer. I have got my ring, and will creep down this very noon. Then, if ever Smaug ought to be napping, and see what he is up to. Perhaps something will turn up. Every worm has its weak spot, as my father used to say, though I am sure it was not from personal experience." Naturally, the dwarves accepted the offer eagerly. Already they had come to respect little Bilbo. Now he had become the real leader in their adventure. He had begun to have ideas and plans of his own. When midday came, he got ready for another journey down into the mountain. He did not like it, of course, but it was not so bad now he knew, more or less, what was in front of him. Had he known more about dragons and their wily ways, he might have been more frightened and less hopeful of catching this one napping. The sun was shining when he started, but it was as dark as night in the tunnel. The light from the door, almost closed, soon faded as he went down. So silent was his going that smoke on a gentle wind could hardly have surpassed it, and he was inclined to feel a bit proud of himself as he drew near the lower door. There was only the very faintest glow to be seen. Old Smaug is weary and asleep, he thought. He can't see me, and he won't hear me. Cheer up, Bilbo. He had forgotten, or he had never heard, about dragons' sense of smell. It is also an awkward fact that they can keep half an eye open watching while they sleep, if they are suspicious. Smaug certainly looked fast asleep, almost dead and dark, with scarcely a snore more than a whiff of unseen steam, when Bilbo peeped once more from the entrance. Sorry, my nose is itching. Allergies are coming back to haunt me. Thief, fire, murder. You're not wrong. Wonder what Smaug does when he's not eating or sleeping. Counting his hoard? Yeah, basically, what was it? It's DuckTales. Isn't it like Scrooge McDuck? Isn't that his name? Am I remembering that correctly? Scrooge McDuck? Scrooge McDuck. I mean, it's basically it, right? Counting his money, eating, and sleeping. That's about it. I mean, there was hunting involved. But that's about it. My body is protesting because I haven't fed it yet. Okay. Okay, when Bilbo peeped once more from the entrance, he was just about to step out onto the floor when he caught a sudden thin and piercing ray of red from under the drooping lid of Smaug's left eye. He was only pretending to sleep. He was watching the tunnel entrance. Hurriedly, Bilbo stepped back and blessed the luck of his ring. Then Smaug spoke. "Well, thief, I smell you, and I feel your air. I hear your breath. Come along. Help yourself again. There is plenty and to spare." But Bilbo was not quite so unlearned in dragon lore as all that, and if Smaug hoped to get him to come nearer so easily, he was disappointed. "No, thank you, O Smaug the Tremendous," he replied. "I did not come for presents. I only wished to have a look at you and see if you were truly as great as tales say. I did not believe them." "Do you now?" said the dragon, somewhat flattered, even though he did not believe a word of it. "Truly, songs and tales fall utterly short of the reality, O Smaug, the chiefest and greatest of calamities," replied Bilbo. "You have nice manners for a thief and a liar," said the dragon. "You seem familiar with my name, but I don't seem to remember smelling you before. Who are you, and where do you come from, may I ask?" "You may indeed. I come from under the hill, and under the hills and over the hills my path led, and through the air I am he that walks unseen." "So I can well believe," said Smaug, "but that is hardly your usual name." "I am the clue finder, the web cutter, the stinging fly. I was chosen for the lucky number." "Lovely titles," sneered the dragon, "but lucky numbers don't always come off." "I am he that buries his friends alive and drowns them and draws them alive again from the water. I am the end of a bag, but no bag went over me." I am from the end of a bag, but no bag went over me. These don't sound so creditable, scoffed Smaug. I am the friend of bears, and the guest of eagles. I am ring winner and luck wearer. I am barrel rider, went on Bilbo, beginning to be pleased with his riddling. That's better, said Smaug, but don't let your imagination run away with you. This, of course, is the way to talk to dragons if you don't want to reveal your proper name, which is wise, and don't want to infuriate them by a flat refusal, which is also very wise. No dragon can resist the fascination of riddling talk and of wasting time trying to understand it. There was a lot here which Smaug did not understand at all, though I expect you do, since you know all about Bilbo's adventures to which he was referring. But he thought he understood enough, and he chuckled in his wicked inside. I thought so last night, he smiled to himself, lakemen from some nasty scheme of those miserable tub-trading lakemen, or I'm a lizard. I haven't been down that way for an age and an age, but I will soon alter that. Very well, O Barrel Rider, he said aloud. Maybe Barrel was your pony's name, and maybe not, though it was fat enough. You may walk unseen, but you did not walk all the way. Let me tell you, I ate 6 ponies last night, and I shall catch and eat all the others before long. In return for the excellent meal, I will give you one piece of advice for your good. Don't have more to do with dwarves than you can help. Dwarves? Said Bilbo in pretended surprise. Don't talk to me, said Smaug. I know the smell and taste of dwarf, no one better. Don't tell me that I can eat a dwarf-ridden pony and not know it. You'll come to a bad end if you go with such friends, thief barrel rider. I don't mind if you go back and tell them so from me. But he did not tell Bilbo that there was one smell he could not make out at all, Hobbit smell. It was quite outside his experience and puzzled him mightily. I suppose you got a fair price for that cup last night, he went on. Come now, did you? Nothing at all. Well, that's just like them. And I suppose they are skulking outside, and your job is to do all the dangerous work and get what you can when I'm not looking? For them? And you will get a fair share. Don't you believe it. If you get off alive, you will be lucky. Bilbo was now beginning to feel really uncomfortable. Whenever Smaug's roving eye, seeking for him in the shadows, flashed across him, he trembled. And I dropped the page. And an unaccountable desire seized hold of him to rush out and reveal himself and tell all the truth to Smaug. In fact, he was in grievous danger of coming under the dragon spell, but plucking up courage, he spoke again. You don't know everything, O Smaug the Mighty, said he. Not gold alone brought us hither. Ha ha! You admit the us, laughed Smaug. Why not say us 14 and be done with it, Mr. Lucky Number? I am pleased to hear that you had other business in these parts besides my gold. In that case you may, perhaps, not altogether waste your time. I don't know if it has occurred to you that, even if you could steal the gold bit by bit, a matter of 100 years or so, you could not get it very far. Not much use on the mountainside. Not much use in the forest, bless me. Had you never thought of the catch? A 14th share, I suppose, or something like it. Those were the terms, eh? But what about delivery? What about cartage? What about armed guards and tolls? And Smaug laughed aloud. He had a wicked and wily heart, and he knew his guesses were not far out, though he suspected that the lake men were at the back of the plans, and that most of the plunder was meant to stop there in the town by the shore that in his young days had been called Esgaroth. You will hardly believe it, but poor Bilbo was really very taken aback. So far, all his thoughts and energies had been concentrated on getting to the mountain and finding the entrance. He had never bothered to wonder how the treasure was to be removed, certainly never how any part of it that might fall to his share was to be brought back all the way to Bag End Underhill. Now a nasty suspicion began to grow in his mind. And had the dwarves forgotten this important point too, or were they laughing in their sleeves at him all the time? That is the effect of dragon talk. That is the effect that dragon talk has on the unexperienced. Bilbo, of course, ought to have been on his guard, but Smaug was rather an overwhelming personality. I tell you, he said, in an effort to remain loyal to his friends and to keep his end up, that gold was only an afterthought with us. We came over hill and under hill by wave and wind for revenge. Surely, O Smaug, the unaccessibly wealthy, you must realize that your success has made you some bitter enemies. Then Smaug really did laugh, a devastating sound which shook Bilbo to the floor. While far up in the tunnel the dwarves huddled together and imagined that the Hobbit had come to a sudden and nasty end. "Revenge!" he snorted, and the light of his eyes lit the hall from floor to ceiling like scarlet lightning. "Revenge! The king under the mountain is dead, and where are his kin that dare seek revenge? Girion, Lord of Dale, is dead, and I have eaten his people like a wolf among sheep. And where are his sons' that dare approach me? I will kill where I wish, and none dare resist. I laid low the warriors of old, and their like is not in the world today. When I was but young and tender. Then I was young and tender. Now I am old and strong, strong, strong. Thief in the shadows, he gloated. My armor is like tenfold shields, my teeth are swords, my claws spears, the shock of my tail a thunderbolt, my wings a hurricane, and my breath death. I have always understood, said Bilbo in a frightened squeak, that dragons were softer underneath, especially in the region of the, chest. But doubtless one so fortified has thought of that. The dragon stopped short in his boasting. Your information is antiquated, he snapped. I am armored above and below with iron scales and hard gems. No blade can pierce me. I might have guessed it, said Bilbo. Truly there can nowhere be found the equal of Lord Smaug the impenetrable. What magnificence to possess a waistcoat of fine diamonds! Yes, it is rare and wonderful indeed, said Smaug, absurdly pleased. He did not know that the Hobbit had already caught a glimpse of his particular undercovering on his previous visit, and was itching for a closer view for reasons of his own. The dragon rolled over. Look, he said, what do you say to that? Dazzlingly marvelous, perfect, flawless, staggering, exclaimed Bilbo aloud. But what he thought inside was, old fool! Why, there is a large patch in the hollow of his left breast, as bare as a snail out of its shell. After he had seen that Mr. Baggins' one idea was to get away. That's oddly worded. After he had seen that Mr. Baggins' one idea was to get away. After he had seen that. Okay, I was reading it wrong. Okay. After he had seen that, Mr. Baggins' one idea was to get away. There we go. Well, I really must not detain your magnificence any longer, he said, or keep you from much needed rest. Ponies take some catching, I believe, after a long start. And so do burglars, he added as a parting shot, and he darted back and fled up the tunnel. It was an unfortunate remark, for the dragon spouted terrific flames after him, and fast though he sped up the slope, he had not gone nearly far enough to be comfortable before the ghastly head of Smaug was thrust against the opening behind. Luckily, the whole head and jaws could not squeeze in, but the nostrils sent forth fire and vapor to pursue him, and he was nearly overcome, and stumbled blindly on in great pain and fear. He had been feeling rather pleased with the cleverness of his conversation with Smaug, but his mistake at the end shook him into better sense. Never laugh at live dragons, Bilbo, you fool, he said to himself, and it became a favorite saying of his later, and passed into a proverb. You aren't nearly through this adventure yet, he added, and that was pretty true as well. Never laugh at live dragons. It's a good adage, I think. Oh, Sarah, thank you so much. Yeah, it's super late for you. Ooh, lectures tomorrow, definitely. Get some sleep. Oh, thank you for keeping the stream on silent, though. That's awesome. Thank you. Rest well. Good luck with the lectures. Yeah, piercing damage is needed against plate. That makes sense. I've never played D&D. You can judge me all you want, but I have never played D&D. It sounds personal. Magnesium burns white. Thank you. I thought it was manganese for some reason in my head. I thought manganese burned white. Magnesium burns white. Thank you. Thank you for correcting me. It's been a long time since I was in that chemistry class, but thank you. And hello. Is that TFG? Yeah, Gary. Hello, Gary. Hello. Just reading a bit more of The Hobbit. Getting close to the end. Okay, so never laugh at live dragons. I think that's apt. That's apt advice. Thank you, Sarah. Now off with you, get some rest. Get some rest. The afternoon was turning into evening when he came out again and stumbled and fell in a faint on the doorstep. The dwarves revived him and doctored his scorches as well as they could, but it was a long time before the hair on the back of his head and his heels grew properly again. It had all been singed and frizzled right down to the skin. In the meanwhile, his friends did their best to cheer him up, and they were eager for his story, especially wanting to know why the dragon had made such an awful noise, and how Bilbo had escaped. But the hobbit was worried and uncomfortable, and they had difficulty in getting anything out of him. On thinking things over, he was now regretting some of the things he had said to the dragon, and was not eager to repeat them. The old thrush was sitting on a rock, nearby with his head cocked to one side, listening to all that was said. And it shows what an ill temper Bilbo was in. He picked up a stone and threw it at the thrush, which merely fluttered aside and came back. "Drat the bird," said Bilbo crossly. "I believe he's listening, and I don't like the look of him." "Leave him alone," said Thorin. The thrushes are good and friendly. This is a very old bird indeed, and is maybe the last left of the ancient breed that used to live about here, tamed to the hands of my father and grandfather. They were a long-lived and magical race. Magical thrushes? And this might even be one of those that were alive then. A couple of hundreds of years or more ago, the men of Dale used to have the trick of understanding their language and used them for messengers to fly to the men of the lake and elsewhere. Well, he'll have news to take to Lake Town, all right, if that's what he's after, said Bilbo. Though I don't suppose there are any people left there that are trouble with thrush language. Why? What has happened? Cried the dwarves. Do get on with your tale. So Bilbo told them all he could remember, and he confessed that he had a nasty feeling that the dragon guessed too much from his riddles added to the camps and the ponies. I am sure he knows we came from Lake Town and had help from there, and I have a horrible feeling that this next move may be in that direction. His next move may be in that direction. I wish to goodness I had never said that about Barrow Rider. It would make even a blind rabbit in these parts think of the lakemen. Well, it cannot be helped. And it is difficult not to slip into talking to a dragon, or so I've always heard, said Balin, anxious to comfort him. Balin's so nice. I think you did very well, if you ask me. You found out one very useful thing at any rate, and got home alive, and that is more than most can say who have had words with the likes of Smaug. It may be a mercy and a blessing yet to know of the bare patch in the old worm's diamond waistcoat. That turned the conversation, and they all began discussing dragon slayings, historical, dubious, and mythical, and the various sorts of stabs and jabs and undercuts, and the various arts, devices, and stratagems by which they had been accomplished. Sorry, my nose is so itchy. There we go. The general opinion was that catching a dragon napping was not as easy as it sounded, and the attempt to stick one or prod one asleep was more likely to end in disaster than a bold frontal attack. All the while they talked, the thrush listened, till at last, when the stars began to peep forth, it silently spread its wings and flew away. And all the while they talked and the shadows lengthened, Bilbo became more and more unhappy, and his foreboding grew. At last he interrupted them. I am sure we are very unsafe here, he said, and I don't see the point of sitting here. The dragon has withered all the pleasant green, and anyway, the night has come, and it is cold. But I feel it in my bones that this place will be attacked again. Smaug knows how I came down to his hall, and you can trust him to guess where the other end of the tunnel is. He will break all this side of the mountain to bits, if necessary, to stop up our entrance, and if we are smashed with it, the better he will like it. You're very gloomy, Mr. Baggins, said Thorin. Why has not Smaug blocked the lower end, then, if he is so eager to keep us out? He has not, nor we should have heard him. I don't know. Because at first he wanted to try and lure me in again, I suppose, and now perhaps because he's waiting till after tonight's hunt, or because he does not want to damage his bedroom if he can help it. But I wish you would not argue. Smaug will be coming out at any minute now, and our only hope is to get well in the tunnel and shut the door. He seemed so much in earnest that the dwarves at last did as he said. Though they delayed shutting the door, it seemed a desperate plan, for no one knew whether or how they could get it open again from the inside, and the thought of being shut in a place from which the only way out led through the dragon's lair was not one they liked. Also, everything seemed quite quiet, both outside and down the tunnel, for So for a longish while, they sat inside, not far down from the half-open door, and went on talking. Oh, nice. That's super cool. Yeah, you learn all sorts of cool stuff when you're like learning about fireworks and stuff like that. Agreed. Someone on TikTok was saying they celebrated New Year's Eve with a science teacher once, and it was like a pop quiz for every rocket. Because yeah, it's how you get the colors of fireworks, is using these different powdered elements in the firework powder. So when they explode, they make a color. So yes, same thing. So green fireworks are made with copper. White fireworks apparently are magnesium. And no, sodium is definitely orange. I forget which one goes red. But different elements, different colors in fire, which is kind of cool. Okay, where was I? Okay, so the dwarves are going on talking. The talk turned to the dragon's wicked words about the dwarves. Bilbo wished he had never heard them, or at least that he could feel quite certain that the dwarves now were absolutely honest when they declared that they had never thought at all about what would happen after the treasure had been won. "We knew it would be a desperate venture," said Thorin, "and we know that still, and I still think that when we have won, it will be time enough to think what to do about it. As for your share, Mr. Baggins, I assure you we are more than grateful, and you shall choose your own 14th, as soon as we have anything to divide. I am sorry if you are worried about transport, and I admit the difficulties are great. The lands have not become less wild with the passing of time, rather the reverse. But we will do whatever we can for you, and take our share of the cost when the time comes. Believe me or not, as you like." From that the talk turned to the great hoard itself, and to the things that Thorin and Balin remembered. They wondered if they were still lying there unharmed in the hall below, the spears that were made for the armies of the great king Bladorthin? Thin bladder? Sorry. Bladorthin. Long since dead. Each had a thrice-forged head, and their shafts were inlaid with cunning gold, but they were never delivered or paid for, shields made for warriors long dead. The great golden cup of Thror, two-handed, hammered and carven with birds and flowers, whose eyes and petals were of jewels. Coats of mail gilded and silvered and impenetrable. The necklace of Girion, Lord of Dale, made of 500 emeralds green as grass, which he gave for the arming of his eldest son in a coat of dwarf-linked rings, the like of which had never been made before, for it was wrought of pure silver to the power and strength of triple steel. But fairest of all was the great white gem, which the dwarves had found beneath the roots of the mountain, the heart of the mountain, the Arkenstone of Thrang. "The Arkenstone! The Arkenstone!" murmured Thorin in the dark, half dreaming with his chin upon his knees. "It was like a globe with 1,000 facets. It shone like silver in the firelight, like water in the sun, like snow under the stars, like rain upon the moon." But the enchanted desire of the horde had fallen from Bilbo. All through their talk he was only half listening to them. He sat nearest to the door with one ear cocked for any beginnings of a sound without. His other was alert for echoes beyond the murmurs of the dwarves, for any whisper of a movement from far below. Darkness grew deeper, and he grew ever more uneasy. "Shut the door," he begged them. "I fear that dragon in my marrow. I like this silence far less than the uproar of last night. Shut the door before it's too late." Something in his voice gave the dwarves an uncomfortable feeling. Slowly, Thorin shook off his dreams, and getting up, he kicked away the stone that wedged the door. Then they thrust upon it, and it closed with a snap and a clang. No trace of a keyhole was there left on the inside. They were shut in the mountain. And not a moment too soon, they had hardly gone any distance down the tunnel when a blow smote the side of the mountain like the crash of battering rams made of forest oaks and swung by giants. The rock boomed, the walls cracked, and stones fell from the roof on their heads. What would have happened if the door had still been open, I don't like to think. They fled further down the tunnel, glad to still be alive, while behind them outside they heard the roar and rumble of Smaug's fury. He was breaking rocks to pieces, smashing wall and cliff with the lashings of his huge tail, till their little lofty camping ground, the scorched grass, the thrush's stone, the snail-covered walls, the narrow ledge, and all disappeared in a jumble of smithereens, and an avalanche of splintered stones fell over the cliff to the valley below. Smaug had left his lair in silent stealth, quietly soared into the air, and then floated heavily and slow in the dark, like a monstrous crow, down the wind towards the west of the mountain, in the hopes of catching unawares something or somebody there, and of spying the outlet to the passage which the thief had used. It was the outburst of his wrath when he could find nobody and see nothing, even where he guessed the outlet must actually be. After he had left his rage in this way, he felt better, and he thought in his heart that he would not be troubled again from that direction. In the meanwhile, he had further vengeance to take. "Barrel rider," he snorted, "your feet came from the waterside, and up the river, and up the water you came without a doubt. I don't know your smell. But if you are not one of those men of the lake, you had their help. They shall see me and remember who is the real king under the mountain." He rose in fire and went away south towards the running river. Thus ends chapter 12 and today's reading. Ba-ba-ba-bum. Ooh, one of my pinned videos has the sound removed. I'll double check that. Thank you for letting me know. Oh, my nose is so itchy right now. It's ridiculous. Oh. But look how far we are. It's bonkers. We've made so much progress. Okay, was there another? I thought there was another. There is. Okay. I'm like, there was another illustration. Let's show that off. Come on, stream. Do it. Transition. Do the thing. There it goes. Okay. So here is the other illustration. This is the front gate of the Lonely Mountain. So this is the southward facing point. The way they ended up going was from the west. But this is the south gate. There we go. And that's the only other illustration that we hit. Trying to see, are there any others? Nope, only at the very, very end. I think those are just the maps. Oh, no, okay. We do have a picture of the hull at back end. And then we have the maps. So, those are always really cool. So there's that map, and then at the beginning of the book, they have Thor's map, which is this one. Every time I see the running river, I keep wanting to say the river running. I don't know why. Alright, so I think we have 2 more weeks. I think we have 2 more weeks of reading The Hobbit. And also, including this week, I think it's technically 3 more weeks that we have of the Lays of Balin. So, that takes us back to where we were over on stream. So, yeah, that's it for today. So we got from chapter 10 through chapter 12. We'll do chapter 13 next Wednesday. Yeah, I'll definitely check out my feed and see which one the sound was removed from. I believe I have saved all of those videos, so if I need to repost it, I will. Here's hoping. Hey, Yakuza Isuka. Yeah, basically. That's it. I don't care if people watch. I'm doing it because I love doing this. Like, I love streaming. Streaming is my favorite. Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I don't tend to have a lot of viewers on my lives. I never have. Honestly, I had more people watching live when I was playing Harry Potter Wizards Unite. It's true. But that game is gone, number 1. And number 2, I'm just not covering Harry Potter anymore. I can't in good conscience anymore. As a trans person, I just can't do it. So there's too much conflict in my brain for that. So I switched to Tolkien stuff, and I'm so much happier. I'm so much happier making the content that I'm currently making. My following is primarily on TikTok right now, so I just passed 43K, which is great. Most of my friends are like over 500,000, but you know, I'm getting there slowly but surely. Pride Month is my month, man. Like, I'm the one queer content creator for Tolkien Talk, so I'm not the only queer person who covers Tolkien over on TikTok, but I'm, I think, the most prominent, who's like specifically Tolkien. So it's what I do, and I really enjoy what I do. And all of it is done sort of in a continuing remembrance of my partner. And I know that she would be really, really proud of me for making content that brought both of us so much joy together. So that's always in the back of my mind, and it keeps me really grateful. Yeah, you know, God willing, if one believes in God, that's, yeah, absolutely. I'm grateful that you guys take the time to continue to watch and follow me. It's really, really sweet. You're welcome. You're welcome. I love reading aloud. It's a lot of fun. It's a challenge for me, too. Because this is about how fast I actually read. I am horrifically slow. Because in my head, I'm basically doing what I'm doing during these streams. I'm reading it aloud as I go. It's very, very hard for me to skim things. So I tend to read very, very slowly. My retention tends to be very good, but I read very slowly. So, I mean, if I wanted to reread these books anyway, I might as well read aloud on stream, because it's gonna take me just as long. I might as well share the experience. And again, I like being background noise for people. Yeah, I've... The problem with audiobooks for me is that I find audiobooks really distracting. Like, I have to be sitting and actively listening to an audiobook for it to penetrate my brain meat. I find it really difficult to do anything while listening to a podcast. I do a little bit better with live streams because I can at least look over and engage more physically with it. But I struggle with straight up podcasts and audiobooks. I'm trying to get more into it, though. I'd really love to listen to Andy Serkis read The Lord of the Rings. I've heard that his version is fantastic. It's a lot of hours of dedication, though. Especially when I plan on rereading it myself after we finish up The Hobbit and The Lays of Balin. That is the next step. And that's gonna take a while. Like, Lord of the Rings is gonna take me a while to get through with all y'all. And it's not going to read quite as fast as The Hobbit. The Hobbit's writing style is so much easier to read. Hey, lurking. Thank you for the lurk. I appreciate that. Ooh, where are we at? 2.5 hours. We actually did pretty well today, considering how many pages we had to get through. Yeah, I feel good about that. Excellent. Yeah, turtle paste. Absolutely turtle paste. Completely accurate. I am a slow reader. It's why I don't do a lot of pleasure reading, honestly. It's why I'm so focused on Tolkien, because I got through Tolkien slowly over a long period of time during high school and college. There was only a small span of time, like, in the latter portion of college where I was reading a lot. It was mostly ebooks and it was mostly erotica, because I became an LGBTQ erotica publisher. Not just a writer, but a publisher. So as such, I was reading a lot. I was reading a lot of kinky shit, but that was a relatively short period of my life where I was reading really frequently. I do it again. But I'm really glad. I'm really glad that, like, me doing this because I'm passionate about it is inspiring. Because I am passionate about it. It's all genuine. It's all genuine. I get down on myself too, just like anybody else. I look at my numbers and they're never exactly where I want them to be, but, you know, I have to remind myself I'm not doing it for the numbers. I'm not doing it for the numbers. I'm doing it to make connections, and those are going to be far fewer in number, but far more important. And far more lasting. I've met some amazing friends through making content, and that happens slowly. And it's precious to me. If you'll excuse the phrase, gosh, this is the wrong live stream to say that. Yeah, it's a different kind of motivation. I'm not here to make a bunch of money either. I'm certainly not doing that. What I am making is from my merch sales. So once again, anybody who has been following the links in my profile and on the screen, if you guys have been following any of that to my various merch stores, especially for Pride Month, like, sincerely thank you. All of those proceeds are going toward top surgery, so I can get rid of these motherfuckers. Bane of my existence. The reason why I tend to shoot my videos really close, because I don't want to deal with this. I don't want this to be the focus. None of that. Can't wait to get rid of it. Cannot wait. Do I have a magic ring? Completely unrelated. I have a Dark Lord with a magic ring. Want to see? It's too cute to not show, okay? This is my Dark Lord. And he has a ring. Bum bum bum. Bum bum bum. Bow to the Dark Lord. This is my Sauron. Isn't he cute? He's so cute. And I mean details. He's got a little earring here on his pointed ear. Little chain earrings. Super gay. As it should be. I love the hair color that they used, and on the arm bracers. See the Eye of Sauron logo? See it? It's so cute. He is the fluffiest little terror. This is like my favorite thing. This is the most satisfying purchase I have made this year. Though a close second would be my binaural mic. So there's that, but I'm still trying to mess with my audio settings to make my ASMR stuff sound better. But it's so cute. Velglor is the name of the creator. It's Dhel Glore, I believe. Velglor. Over on Twitter. They post pictures of their ones that are in progress. I got Sauron. One of the other viewers whom I am familiar with got Melkor. So every so often we'll have to take pictures, like the Dark Lords are conversing with each other. Because we're fucking geeks, and that's half the fun. Isn't it cute though? The little red cape and everything. I can't. It's so adorable. I love it. Though honestly, what makes it is the outline, the red outlines for the eyes and the smirk. It's all about the red outlines and the smirk. Frickin' cute. I can't. And I mean, the crown is detachable, so. I don't know. Like, I mean, if we're being honest, smash or pass. Because frickin' smash. Who can say no to this? He's so cute. Oh man. Though I did see someone today mention that it's too bad that Lee Pace was already cast as Thranduil in The Hobbit because we missed out on him being Anatar. And I'm like, damn! Why'd you have to do that in my brain? Because him wearing, like, the gold wig for Anatar, or maybe them skewing into the redhead territory, which is really just fanon. It's just the fandom that assumes that Myron / Sauron would have red hair. Because he's a fire being, you know? Like, he's a fiery spirit guy. It makes sense to have him red-haired. That and red hair is super rare. It's super rare in Tolkien's world, so, you know, make him a redhead. Cat-sized crown. That's true. My cats aren't here. My bed is still unmade. It's a mess of a day for me, honestly. I'm gonna have to try that out, though. I think Gray's head is too fat for this, though. He's my potato of a cat. He's my potato boy. But yeah, this could go on a cat's head. It might fuck with their ears. I'll try it. If I can get a picture, I'll post it on Instagram. If I can get a picture of it, I'll try. I make no promises, but I will try. Oh, man. So that is my Dark Lord. He's super freaking cute. Velglor on Twitter. Amazing. They just have a Ko-fi. They have a Ko-fi shop, and they open it every few months. So, highly recommend. If you like, I think they're making stuff for Our Flag Means Death right now, maybe? Question mark? They make a lot of Witcher ones, and they've made a lot of Tolkien ones. So, super geeky person. Love them. Highly recommend. Redhead Sauron, blonde Anatar. That is fandom. That is fandom's interpretation. I always pictured Sauron as being, like, a darker red hair. I don't know. Like, I feel like Myron, in his original form before he gets fully corrupted, he's like this color. Like the really bright orange ginger kind of red. He strikes me as that. And maybe even originally with blue eyes before he gets corrupted. But the moment he turns to evil and lets that darkness in, that's when he gets the Eye of Sauron eyes. The flame-colored eyes. And can you imagine Lee Pace dressed like that? Oh my god. Like, I mean, Galadriel can step on my throat whenever she wants. And this is specifically Morfydd Clark's Galadriel, a younger Galadriel. I have too much respect for Cate Blanchett. And she's I don't know. Cate Blanchett's Galadriel has a different vibe to me. Like, I would still bow, of course, but just different vibe. I would be heartbroken if Cate Blanchett's Galadriel hit me. I'd be like, what have I done? I would be distraught. Versus Morfydd Clark's Galadriel hitting me. It's got a different vibe, and I'll just leave it at that, okay? Emig, go ahead, Onin. Mommy, sorry. Give my kitty some nip first. Yeah, I'll have to try getting the little hat on him. We'll see. He'll look properly dark though. He's a great boy. I might have more success with Alana than with Gray. And she's smaller, so it would probably fit her better. We'll see. If I manage it, I'll try and get pictures. I would thank her. Yeah, may I have another? Basically, a different vibe, different vibe with Morfydd Clark. That Morfydd Clark, the way she speaks Elvish. Oh my gosh, the way she speaks Elvish though. The way she trills her R's. Mordor. Like, it's so juicy. She does such a good job with it. Probably because I believe she has a Welsh background, so if she can speak Welsh, she's going to do amazingly with Sindarin. Sindarin is very, very Welsh-like. The pronunciation and the trilling of the R's and all the mutations. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Can't wait to hear her speak more Elvish. It's going to be fantastic. And not even coming from, you know, any sort of squeaky erotic place. Just, I can't wait to hear her speak Elvish. It's going to be so good. Her Elvish is just going to be on point. I already know. I already know it. I can't wait. It'll also be nice because this will be our first opportunity to get updated Elvish. Because the stuff that's in all of the movies, all the PJ movies, is all currently outdated. It's outdated now. A lot of it is the same, but certain things in the language have changed since, like, 2004. I think 2017 is when we got the last Parma Eldalamberon. Or at least Parma Eldalamberon number 17, I think it was. Which had a lot of new Elvish information in it, and it completely changed what we knew about, you know, things for verbs and pronouns and all sorts of stuff. So this is our first opportunity, if they have an Elvish expert, which I'm very sure they do. They're going to have at least one linguist on this team and a dialect coach. So having those people help with the Elvish, this will be our first chance to see an updated version of Neo Sindarin. I'm really excited about that. Now, I don't want people coming for me. I do not want people coming for me and asking me to, like, immediately translate the Elvish from the show. Not only because there should be subtitles, but because I'm not that good, okay? I'm not fluent. There's no such thing as fluency. You know, people on TikTok consider me an expert. I do not label myself an expert. I translate stuff for fun, but it takes me time. That's why people pay me money, because it takes me time to do it. And I try to do right. I try to do right by the Elvish linguistic community. I know I am little tiny baby compared to people who have been studying this for years. And my knowledge of Elvish is largely outdated, which is again why it takes me so long to do my translations. Because I'm referencing and looking at stuff and trying to make sure I'm using updated knowledge and not just the knowledge that I learned back in 2004 when I took Elvish lessons from my partner. So it's different. It's different now. But I can't wait to hear Morfydd speak Elvish. It's like the whole talk dirty to me thing, but like just talk Elvish at me. I'm gonna love it. I'm gonna love it. Just hearing anybody speaking in Neo Sindarin again is gonna be such a thrill. It's gonna be so cool. That's why, honestly, even if the show ends up being crap, I will still at least get the satisfaction of listening to people speak in Elvish again. So, I mean, like, it's not gonna be a total wash. I will judge it fairly. I'm definitely giving the show the benefit of the doubt. I don't want to judge it until I see it, period. But after it's out, man, I will pass judgment. I'll look at details. I'll pick out things that might niggle at me, but I don't think like ruin the show or anything. You won't hear me use absolutist language very much. So if I say this absolutely ruined it for me, like that's a big deal coming from me, because I don't tend to say stuff like that. I might say something like, this pulled me out of the moment, because it would. But that's very specific to me. It's very opinion-based rather than statement of fact. Because we at the very least know that the Rings of Power TV show is being very well researched. There are people and experts involved that are very passionate about the source material, and they're doing their due diligence. Now, whatever they choose to keep and then choose to depart from is, whether people like that or not is going to be completely subjective. But I'm thinking of the Rings of Power much like I think of the Hobbit movies. It's fanfic. And either it'll be good fanfic or bad fanfic for every individual who encounters it. Some people like stuff and other people don't. And that's just the way of things when it comes to fanfic adaptation. So I'm, knowing that there are going to be original characters and stuff, I'm going to let it be what it is, and we'll see if I like it. I just hope I'm really hoping there's some sort of queerness stuck in there somewhere. Please. For the love of God, please. We've been waiting long enough. Please make your elves bi or something. I'm ready for that, okay? I am ready. I am ready for there to be an energy between, Gil-galad and Elrond, or between Celebrimbor and Annatar, where it makes perfect canonical sense. Because Sauron is gonna play whatever game he has to get what he wants, right? We all know this. If he sees a glimmer in Celebrimbor's eyes when Celebrimbor meets him, he's gonna play into that. He's gonna lean hard into that to get whatever he wants out of Celebrimbor. So, those are my opinions, and I'll leave it at that. But we're coming up on 3 hours now, so I'm gonna call the stream to an end. Thank you guys for sticking with me. And especially for people over on TikTok, I know you guys were here even longer than typical because I started over there first. But thanks, guys. There will be Silmarillion Saturday on Saturday, as always, and next Wednesday I will be back with more Hobbit goodness. I think we've got 2 more weeks, and I'm excited about it. So there will be more reading, and again, if I have the time to mess with my audio settings, I'll try and do some ASMR. I might just do a stream where I mess with stuff. Do my best. I can't gain a following for ASMR work without actually doing ASMR work, right? But I love the concept of Elvish ASMR, so I'm gonna try and do more of that. But everybody, please take care. Thank you for sticking with me for so long, and I will see you guys at the very least on Saturday. So, bye guys! Love you all. Please take care. Please take care, guys. I'll see you guys soon. Bye!